Okay, welcome to part 12. Major things we're covering in this one are two super important things to game feel, and that's hit pause and screen shake. Or you could call it hit stop, screen pause, and you could call it camera shake, whatever names you want to call them. These are really major things for basic game feel, and I'm just going to show you the method that I use in my games. So yeah, we might cover a couple little other things too, but you know, those are the main things that we're covering. So yeah, this is a good one. Okay, good luck. Okay, so you heard all the rigmarole I gave you at the beginning of the intro, so you know what we're doing. You know that it's a bunch of little stuff. So I'm just going to kind of do this in the order that I freaking feel like it. How about that? So I want to add in like a little pot with a tree, and I want to add in like a cool weird planter object. So I'm going to go do that. So this is going to be my S plant pot. There's a little pot with a tree in it, and then there's another frame that doesn't have the tree. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the frame rate to 0. So in the image editor, I can just pick which one of these that I want to do on a case by case basis. Got my collision mask all right, and I put my origin just at the bottom here. We'll drag that up here, and now I can create the object for it. So object plant pot. I'm going to select my plant pot. In the create event, I'm going to set the depth, and I'll set it to negative bounding box top for the top of the collision mask. And its parent is going to be a solid wall, and that's literally it. Solid wall object that all it's going to be used for is just making the game look prettier. So I'm just going to kind of drop some in, and so I have a little bit more control about where I want to put them. I might change my grid to 8 pixels by 8 pixels so I can scoot them around a little bit nicer. Yeah. Maybe outline these guys with one like that. I might scoot all these over like one little bit. Might put a couple like right here. That would look nice. Maybe scoot this over and one like here, and here. No. Oh, there we go. There, and there. Maybe like there, and there. Might just get rid of this guy. Do some more at these corners. That guy right there. That guy right there. Boom, 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 boom. Maybe sort of line the path right there, huh? Maybe put one right here. I don't know. I'm just kind of putting them wherever I want to now. Right there? Maybe right there? That might be a little too narrow. I don't need one there, which means I don't need one there. Okay. And if I ran this game, we'd be all good. But yep, walking behind it, walking in front of it, running into it, and it's stopping the bullets. Excellent. Okay, we're starting to look a little bit nicer. And I think I'm going to add one more little visual fun thing. So I'm going to create a new sprite. So here I've got like a single frame planter. So the image speed doesn't really matter, and it's got some purple vines on it. Got my collision mask in the right place, kind of. Okay, there we go. And I'm gonna make it pretty much the exact same thing as the plant pot. So I'm just gonna duplicate the plant pot and call this object planter. Choose my planter sprite, and that should be all good to go. So it's gonna keep all these up here. So this should also be fine. Oh, and I suppose I could, make some of these just regular pots by changing the frame here. So I might as well do that. Even though I think the trees just kind of look better, but I could do that if I wanted. I might add like I gave this space so I could add like a little wall here. Maybe I'm gonna scoop both these in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. That's pretty cool. I might add in a couple little more schmiggins of grass here, just for yeah. I might replace that one with this one. There we go. More mushrooms. Nice. Okay, so I think we're looking pretty dang good now. And yep, these work. So yeah, I think we're looking pretty good. I'm liking this. But yeah, I could be a little bit better with some of my item placements and my crates. But yeah, so I mean, that was barely a how-to. That was just kind of me creating a couple new wall objects to put around, but you probably could have figured that out on your own since we've basically done it already. But I mean, that's just how easy it is to add in stuff like this now. So if you wanted to add in trees or whatever, you could do that. And this will help us show off one thing really quick for another little layer of polish, which this might have been something you already did anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But so my bullets are going behind the little mausoleum there, and they're also going, they're going behind, but they're showing up on top of the tree in the mausoleum. Same with this place over here. There we go. And again, you probably figured this out on your own, but if you want me to point it out for you, I'll do it. We can go into our parent bullet object, and we can just add in some depth code. So depth equals -y. And that should improve the way that visual looks. Yep, look at that. Showing up behind the trees now properly. And should be the same with the mausoleums. Yep, showing up behind them. Nice. Bullets are kind of going through this part, but we had kind of already talked about why that happens. Now let's get into the real gameplay polishy stuff. So something you might have thought about is, hey, how the heck can I add in a pause screen and make everything stop? Well, friend, we're going to cover a pause screen, and we're also going to, at the same time, a really awesome polishing feature that a lot of action games have, and I'm going to call this hit pause. or people call it hit freeze, screen pause, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to do this before we do any more visual effects like a weapon muzzle flash or enemies bursting into smoke or anything like that. We're going to do this first because it's going to come in handy. Because hit pause is actually something that you need to factor into your game pretty much right whenever you start making it. So we're a little late to the party already. We've already pretty much made a game. So why am I waiting to show you how to do hit pause? Well, there's a lesson in this, okay? And the lesson is the better you plan out how you want your game to work before you start working on it, easier it's going to be to make. So it's going to take a little bit of work to add in our hit pause feature now, but moving forward, it will be very easy to make sure that the game is compensating for it. And you'll also be able to see how if we added this feature pretty much first, how easy it would have been to just add to everything else. So first, I'm going to kind of organize some of this stuff into where I think it should probably go. Probably put the spawner in with enemies. Probably put this stuff in with the player, and I might put the boom in the wall objects just because that's where the boom crate was. And then this goes in with the enemies. Cool. So anyways, let's make a new object, and I suppose I'm going to put it in my game control folder. So create a new object, and I'm going to call it object screen pause. And interestingly enough, we are not going to do a single thing in this object. It just needs to exist. Because basically what we're going to do is anytime we want the screen to pause, we are going to create a version of our object screen pause that maybe has a timer in it. So it only lasts for a couple frames or something like that. Because basically what hit pause or screen pause looks like is a lot of times it happens at the point of impact in an action in a game. And it's really just a feel thing. It might, you might not even really realize that a lot of the times whenever you're playing a game that the screen is actually freezing for a bit, intentionally. That's because really, like I said, it's just a feel thing. Our game right now feels very floaty, I suppose. Especially whenever you think about the blue bullets that just go right through the enemies. It doesn't feel like they impact at all. They just touch the enemies and they lose a little bit of health. It makes our game feel very flimsy. So hit pause is sort of one of the first things that you can do to kind of remedy that stuff. And in a shooter, we're probably not going to use it a whole lot, but we can still use it, especially for the player getting hit. So anyways, basically what we're going to do is we're going to use any of our objects that are running important code or animating. They're basically going to check and see if this object exists. And if it does, then we're going to freeze our animation and we're not going to run any of the logic in our, say, step events. And like I said, it normally only lasts for a couple frames in a game, so normally this object that would show up would basically just freeze everything for like 3 or so frames, and then maybe on a timer have it count down and then get rid of itself. But we could also have like an actual pause screen, which is a child of this, and it pauses the logic for everything that we want it to. So first of all, we're just going to have this, and I'll show it off very simply by using the enemies first. So we're going to go into the step event, and we're going to go to the very tippy top of the step event and say pause self. So like I said, first we want to check if there's a screen pauser. So if instance exists, screen pause. What we're going to do is first we're going to set our image speed to be 0, which will freeze our animation. And then we're just going to straight up exit, which means that our image is frozen and we're not running any logic in our step event. Now, technically our draw event is still going to have to run because we still want our enemy to draw, all that stuff. So the enemy isn't completely stopped, but just the important part, this code where it can move around, where it can damage the player, because now we're also exiting, we're not getting damaged, which is what I meant to say. We don't have to run any of this code while the game is frozen. So we're not going to chase the player. We're not going to do literally anything because we can't. And so then if there's not a screen pauser around, we just want to make sure that we say, otherwise we'll set our image speed back to 1, which this shouldn't really interfere in case you've been messing with the image speed variable in your step events. As long as you're setting that every single frame as well, then it should be fine. But in general, I just kind of avoid using image speed. You've noticed anytime that like I've had the player stop walking, I've normally just forced their image index to be one thing or the other. But if you've been following this guide and you're at this video, I assume you have pretty similar code to me. So this shouldn't cause any problems. So first of all, if I just run the game normally, you'll find that all the enemies are doing exactly what they're supposed to do, like regular. But now if I go into my room and I drop in a screen pause, so room 1, and I'll just drop in a screen pause right over here. Doesn't really matter where it is. Now all the enemies will be frozen as if they haven't run any code yet. Look at that. They're not moving. They're completely stuck. They can't get damaged because they're just not running anything in their code there. So awesome. Now I'm still getting damaged because my player is still running code, but you know, in this circumstance, we would also want to freeze the player. So now that you see how it works, first of all, we can get rid of that and we can add the same code into the player's step events. And we still want to get the inputs because especially if we wanted to do something like pause the game, pausing the game shouldn't really be determined by whether or not we have a screen pause. That's not the kind of input we're locking out. We just want to lock out the movement and the animation and stuff like that. Because, for example, our pause screen is going to be a child of the screen pauser. So we still want to be able to interact with it that way. So pause self. So again, we say if instance exists screen pause. Once again, we want to set our image speed to be 0 and we want to exit so we don't run any more code in the step event. And we want to make sure that once the screen pauser is gone, our image speed is back to 1. And so let's just make a dummy pause menu real quick. So I'm gonna put this here and say pause menu because we can just use a screen pauser. The only reason we're gonna make an actual pause menu is because we're gonna have visuals for it, obviously. But so we could add in like a start button or a pause button, whatever you'd want to call it. So I say let's go add that real quick. We can go into our object input to add a new key press in the create event. And so what do we want to call that? I'm going to separate these out like this. So I'm going to say global.start key, and we're just looking for whether or not it's been pressed, not holding it. So start key pressed is what I'm going to call it. And you can set that to whatever you want to. So I'm going to say global.start key pressed equals keyboard check pressed. Remember, just a key press, not holding it. So not keyboard check pressed. And I'm just going to check for enter. So you could do escape if you wanted to, which would just be VK escape like that. If you wanted to do that, I'm going to use enter. So now I have a start button defined. So I'm going to go back into my player and maybe add it up here as well. And I'm going to say my start key pressed in my player is my global.start key pressed. So now I'm going to say if I press that button, oops, okay, get rid of that. If I press that button, I should just note, obviously you could just not do this line and do this if you want, same thing. So, but anyways, so I'm just going to treat the object screen pause as the game pause screen. So I'll just say if not instance exists object screen pause. So if there isn't one, I'm going to create one, and it does not matter where or at what depth I created at. So all zeros, create a screen pause. Cool. And then otherwise, if we press the start key, but there already was a screen pauser, then we can destroy it. So this will basically turn on and off pausing just with no visuals other than everything stops. So I hit pause and everything is stopped. Now you see that the bullet objects are still moving and that one bullet object kept moving, but that's just because we only have the freezing code in the enemies and the player. And so now you can see why I said it's easier to add in a feature like this towards the beginning of the game and plan for it, because now we're going to need to go back and pick some objects that, you know, also need to freeze. But this should be working for you. If it doesn't, then just go back and watch this. If earlier whenever you tested it, your enemies froze, but now you're trying to pause it and they're not freezing, then you just need to watch the last part again and just see how I did all the setup for that, because obviously it's working here. Just double check everything we've done in the past couple minutes. And I can unpause and pause, and we see those are still moving, pausing and unpausing. I can even pause it while my player is blinking, so can't see him. I wonder if, okay, I paused the game, so none of those touched the player. Yeah, so because the player's not running any code. Good. So yeah, we found 2 more things that we want to add to this. So that is the enemy bullets, and we also want to add our player bullets because see, they kept going. So cool. Once you got all that working, now we basically just need to add this code into anything that moves around and interacts with stuff. So first of all, we got our player bullets. So I'm going to do this in my blue bullet. So I'm just going to add that code to the very top. And now you might be wondering if there's a slightly less messy way to make this like into, say, a function, because now we have it in 3 different places. And actually, yes, there is, but it's going to be a little weird. And that's because of this keyword that we have right here, the exit keyword. That's because exit exits the current block of code that it's running. So if I call it in a step event, it cuts off the rest of the step event. However, if I call this in the middle of a function, it only cuts off the rest of the stuff happening in the function. So we're going to need to use another feature of the functions in GameMaker, but instead of just copy and pasting this, 7-line thing, we can make it slightly easier for ourselves. So I can go into custom functions, And I'm going to open this up big, close all this, roll this back to normal. Okay. So I'll just add it in here. We could add this in a section, you know, called like VFX or something like that if you wanted to. So let's call this function. We can call the function screen pause like this, easy. And I'm going to paste in that code that we had, and cool. So here's how we're going to do this. Like I said, this code isn't going to work because if it finds our object screen pause, it's only going to exit this function, which really will do nothing. So all this would be doing is setting the object's image speed to 0, but it wouldn't be exiting our step event for us. So that's fine because we can return values from our function. So, you know, something like length direction returns a number for you, you know, and same with place meeting. Place meeting returns a true or false value. Instance place returns an ID of an object. So we can also tell our own functions that we make to return values. So simply put, instead of exiting right here, we can just use a different keyword that is specifically for functions. And instead of exiting, we can use return, and then we can type in a value here. So basically what's going to happen is whenever we call screen pause, all of this code is going to run, and then we want to return true or false as to whether or not the screen is paused. So if there is a screen pauser, we can return true, and return also acts very similarly to exit. So once you call return, it's going to immediately return this answer into the function and not run any code for the rest of the function. Doesn't make a huge difference here, but it's good to know that that's what it does. And so if there is not a screen pause, then we want to return false. So this function is still checking for a screen pauser, and it is still setting our image speeds, which is great. But now it can also return a true or false value. So for instance, if I were to go back into my object zombies, since they're the most obvious, instead of doing all this code, I could just say if screen pause is equal to true, then I can say exit. So now it won't run any code after this. And it can also be simplified even more to where we don't even have to actually ask if it's set to true. If we just ask GameMaker if screen pause, it's now already checking for a true or false on its own. So we're just saying if the screen is paused, then exit. And right here in this code, it's also already stopping all of our animation and all that too. So we could change all this to be one line of code, and let's just run it to make sure that it is doing that. And it is. So great. Our enemies are freezing just how they were and unfreezing. So now anytime we want an object to actually get paused by our screen pauser, we just need to put this code above all of the important stuff that we want to have paused. So now I can go back into the player and add that right here. And I can go into the object blue bullet, which is the parent of these other two, and put that at top. And now since these guys pretty much just have the exact same inherited code from the blue bullet, the screen pause will still work. However, for example, in our yellow bullet, obviously we're setting the image angle here in our step event. At least we did it first. I got that wrong and I haven't fixed it yet, but hopefully I already went back and fixed it in the video that we did it. But for example, for an object like this, as I said, the exit command only works for the current code block that it's actually in. So if I'm running event inherited, it's going to run this whole code block there, but it's got the same issue as trying to run the exit command in the function that we made. So it runs this exactly like all this. So it will still pause all of this really important code. But if I had more code down here that was important, like say I had, image angle plus equals 10, because whenever I shot the yellow bullets, I wanted them to do something crazy, right? Add that here. So if I had it to where, you see how they all like move like this, you'll see what happens is if I pause the game now, their movement logic stops, but they keep spinning because that code isn't actually checking for screen pauses. So any child object that has important code that you also want to freeze for that reason, you would just have to add the pause on top of that as well. So now if I ran this code and I hit the pause button, you see that they all stop. So cool. That's the little crash course on how the screen pausing works. So I'm just going to set this back. This doesn't matter because the direction is never going to change while it's frozen. So I don't actually need to add that there. That was just an example. But yeah, so now all the players' bullets will freeze. Since this one has no unique step event code, that will freeze. I want to add it to the enemy bullets as well. So not in here, not the create event, obviously. Just at the top of the step event here, so we stop moving and we stop animating. So put that up here. So we got the enemy bullet down. Another thing I can think of is the the spawner. We want the spawner to stop doing any logic. It already doesn't animate, but that doesn't matter. We just want to make sure that it's not ticking the timer and trying to spawn more enemies, right? Like I said, there's a lot to think about, especially if you try and add stuff like this late. And we are a little late, but not that late. We're only going to have to add it to, you know, I don't know, around 10 things or so. So it's not that bad, but imagine if you didn't think about this until later, or also just imagine how much easier it would be if you set this up in the very beginning whenever you made your game, before you started, you know, making anything. So yeah, the spawner was another one. I had something else. I suppose the heart floats up and down. This is one thing, since the heart technically doesn't really even move and it only waits for the player to run into it. This is kind of a debatable thing, as, you know, do you even care to put the code in here? It doesn't matter to you that the heart will still float up in place, and otherwise the player has to run into it. So if the player is frozen, it doesn't really matter. But I don't want it to float up in place. I want it to pause as much as possible, so I can just add it into the heart. Same thing with the weapon pickup. I can add that at the very top of the step event here. Let's see. Ooh, our boom, our explosion, our big boom, that is animated. So let's do that here so we can actually have it freeze properly. So, okay, as far as I can think of, that's everything that has, you know, important gameplay logic. So I'm just gonna run the game, and chances are over time, oh, look at that. Look how screen frozen that is. Now, obviously our tile layer is still animating, but that's a little bit more complicated. So yeah, we can worry about that later, or also maybe not. Maybe I might gloss over it. But anyways, the real important thing is the gameplay stuff, right? So let's break this guy, and then, oh, there we go. Paused. Got it. And paused. Got it. Easy. All my bullets are working. Let's see. I can beat up some guys, and so they can drop some hearts. I think I set the number really high though, didn't I? Yeah, I set it to like 30. So okay, hold on. Okay, hold on. Okay, we got a heart. It's floating right there, but if I pause it, not floating anymore, I can grab it, blow that up, beat those guys. This thing should freeze. Yep, its animation freezes too, so it stops shimmering. Nice. Grab it. Oh, I thought I fixed this code. Whoa. Wait a minute, what did I do? This is cool. Whoa. Oh, I definitely did something weird. Wow, that's kind of cool. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna go fix that real quick. Even though that looks really cool, I actually like it a lot. But what the heck did what did I do? Oh, plus equals. Duh. Okay. There we go. Just equals direction. Silly boy. In fact, I already showed you how to fix this, but it has been bothering me that the first one is sideways. So I'm going to go fix that in the way that I already showed you in that video, just really quick. Okay, so we've got our functioning screen pausing, and now we can make two things out of that. One, we can just make a pause menu, which is kind of what we already have in the game already. So I'm going to my game control, and I'm going to create an object, and I'm going to create an object pause screen. Cool. Now the parent of this object, we obviously want to be our object screen pause, which I'm realizing that having pause screen and screen pause is maybe confusing. So maybe I'll just call this pause menu. I'm not going to actually add any menu stuff to it, but because you can actually kind of crowdsource menus from other videos of mine. But anyways, we're going to do this pause menu kind of like how we did our game over screen, except I'm just going to do it like even more simple. So in my game over screen, we drew like a translucent black rectangle, and then we drew some text. I'm just going to do the same thing again. So I'm going to do something somewhat irresponsible, and I'm just going to copy all this code from the game over screen's draw event. Like I said, this is pretty irresponsible, but I'm kind of tired, and I want this to be the rapid fire kind of episode. So anyways, copied all that code. I'm going to go into my object pause menu, add a draw event, and then I'm going to paste this in that draw event. And right out the gate, we have some things that we need to get rid of. First of all, we have not set our alpha or alpha max variables in there. We don't need alpha max because we're not going to fade this in. We're just going to have the screen just immediately pop up as dimmed with the word paused in the middle. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of that alpha right there. And then this alpha just needs to be 1. Okay, make sure you're following properly. So before I change anything else, I'm just going to go ahead into my pause menu and add a create event. And we need to add an alpha variable. And I think like 0.6 is fine. That's just the alpha for the black rectangle being drawn. So that's cool. What we also need to do is go ahead and set the depth to something pretty high. So if you remember our depth for our, HUD was, I believe, -9,000. So I'll have it show up below so that way we can see our health and our enemy count. So we need to make the number go a little bit higher. So I'm going to say this is negative 8,500 instead of negative 9,000. But if you wanted it to, you know, cover up the HUD. Oh, why did I put P? You just do that. So I'm going to put that there. And now we can get some stuff out of our draw event that we don't need. So we don't want to write game over, obviously. We want to write paused. I also never got rid of my, my extra little lines of code here from when I was trying stuff out. So we want that to say paused. And I'll do it like that. And maybe I'll do what we did down here. And I'll have like just the little wings around it. Just make it look nice. If you want, you can change this message to be like press start to return. But honestly, I just wanted to say paused. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I want it to be right in the middle of the screen. So I don't even need this offset variable anymore. So I'm just going to get rid of that and get rid of that over here. So it just says paused right in the middle of the screen. And then resetting all the drawing settings is good. We don't need to set this alpha anymore because it's already set back to, whoa, Jesus. We don't need to set this alpha anymore because it's already set to 1 up here. So we don't need to reset that right there. So yeah, that should work. And remember, the parent has to be the object screen pause. So let's go back into our player and just replace this code right here. We want this to be our object pause menu. So if a pause menu doesn't exist, then we create one, and otherwise we destroy it. And let's run the game and let's try it out. Nice, it works. I might make this paused word a little bit smaller, but I can unpause and cool. And the HUD shows up on top of it. So the HUD's still nice and bright. So I like that. I might go in and change it. Yeah, I might change the scale. I might even just make it 1. So if I hit pause and then I hit enter. Okay, cool. I like the way that looks. So just a very, very simple pause screen. The only purpose it's really serving is just letting the player have like a reprieve whenever they want to. Maybe go grab a Gatorade and fuel up for the gaming that's about to take place. So nice. Pause screen, easy. One thing that we probably want to check for is probably the way the game works right now. And this is something you have to think about when making things like different menus or whatever. But there's probably a circumstance where the player can get hit and their HP can go to 0, and on the same frame, the player can press enter or press the start button and open up the pause menu at the same time as the game over screen, which wouldn't look very good. So one way to deal with this is in our destroy event of our player, we could just say, if an instance exists of the pause menu, get rid of it just for safety. So add a destroy event for the player and say get rid of the pause menu, and if instance exists object pause menu, then we will instance destroy object pause menu. And like I said, this is more just a testing thing, so it's going to be kind of hard to test regardless, but this is probably not a bad check to have. So when the player is destroyed, we make sure that there's no pause menu. If you wanted to, you could also go into the pause menu and add a step event, and instead of adding the destroy event for the player, you could in here constantly check, if instance exists object player, or if not instance exists object player, then destroy myself, like that. That would work too. And this version actually technically might be a little bit better if, say, you do have pause menu down here and you have like settings and quitting the game and stuff down here. If you ran the code this way, we know that the player would be in the game over state. So we could say if our player doesn't exist, then destroy ourselves, and we could exit. So that way we wouldn't, open up any other menus down here on the same frame that the player died or whatever. So just 2 ways to clean up that little issue that could happen. And by could happen, I mean it will. Anytime someone plays a game, they break stuff. So anyways, those are 2 ways to do it. This way might be slightly better than the player's destroy event. So since I have it in the step event there, I can just cut out this destroy event. I don't need it anymore. So cool. There's a basic pause screen / pause menu. And like I said, I have a menu system tutorial that could show you how to set up a menu system and stuff like that. It doesn't directly show you how to do a lot of different settings, but it shows you how to set up the menu to scroll through it and go through like sub menus and stuff like that. And it should be be pretty easy to figure out how you would want to manipulate some global variables for settings and stuff like that. But anyways, so now we have a pause menu that pauses the game. That's the important part we were looking for. So now we can talk about the actual hit pause type stuff. And that's going to be cool too, because it's so dang easy. So back down here by my pauser objects, and I'm going to create another object, and this is going to be called screen pause, and we're going to say timed. So screen pause timed. So this is also going to be a child of object screen pause, but the only difference is going to be that this has a little timer in it, and we're going to set it to a low value, so like 3 or 4 or something like that. And then this thing is just automatically going to destroy itself. So in our step event, we can subtract from our timer to count down, and then we can go above it and say if timer is less than or equal to 0, then we will destroy ourselves. So yeah, simple. And the reason that we put timer above where we're actually counting it down is because we want this to last for 3 frames. And so we get down here and we go 1 frame, back around, we go 2 frames, and then back around and we go 3 frames. Now timer is equal to 0. And so then it's gone on the next frame. And so that's 3 proper frames. Whereas if it were under the first frame this is created on, timer would already be 2 right here. So that would only last 2 frames. So that's why I put it up there. And so let me show you how these will work. So first I'm going to change the timer to like 7, just so it's higher and it's a little bit more, it'll be a little bit more visible. So we are going to put this in our boom crate. So whenever the crate first explodes, the screen is going to freeze for a little bit. So here is where we're creating the explosion object and destroying it. So we can also add in a line of code and say screen pause. And at the same time, we can instance create depth. Once again, X, Y, and depth do not matter at all. And we just need to create our timed screen pauser. And we, remember, just need to make sure that its parent is the object screen pause. So when one of these explodes, the game should pause for a second, maybe even almost look like it's lagging. So just to make it more obvious again, I'm just going to bump up the timer to 12. So it's pretty obvious. So let's blow this up. Oh, yep, you see that? So nice. With such a huge number on it. So 12. 12 almost does feel like the game is lagging. However, if you put it in the right place and you pick the right times, it can really help with just a little bit of impact. So 3 frames is not much, but it did kind of give us like almost a little bit more of an impact. So not bad. We can add it in different places too. The main place I'm thinking of is when the player gets hit, but it's helping out with our game feel a little bit, but it's really going to help out whenever we add in our screen shaking. So first let's finish up this screen pausing. So for instance, before we add this anywhere else, if a certain object wanted to have a higher timer, which means the screen pause was more intense, which means something crazier probably happened, we want to do that thing where we go inside this new instance and we can just set the timer as we create it. So, normally I would set this to like a variable like instance and then say equals that. And then we would say with this instance, yada yada. We could do that, but now I'll kind of show you the abridged version of it. Because this function is returning the ID already, we can actually just do this. We can say with, and then we can use the whole function of creating it because it's returning the ID right here. So with this object that we're creating right now, I can set the timer to whatever I want. So make it something massive. So timer 60. I don't know what you would ever use this for, but who knows? Just to show you. So the default is just 3 frames, which is barely noticeable. And now whenever we explode it, it should be 60. So yeah, there we go. So much like looking for our screen pauser, we can actually turn this into a function on its own. So I'm going to copy this really quick, and we're going to go back into our custom functions, wherever I may have put them. Game control? Okay, yeah. Into our custom functions, and we can put this right under our screen pause thing. So we can call this function create screen pause. So that way we know. I suppose we also could have named this first one screen is paused or something like that and just called this one screen pause. But as long as you can tell the difference between the two, it doesn't really matter. I think these two are fine. But so now I'm going to paste in that little code that we had. So with an instance of our timed pauser, we want to set a specific time. So we can add an optional argument up here. So I'll add time. And we can set the default to be 3, which is the default in this object anyways. But then we can just set the timer down here like this. So instead of having this big chunk of code where you have to type out all this stuff and then say timer equals whatever, now we can just use this function and input the amount of frames that we want it to lag. So if I were to go up here and say create screen pause, I can just type this in as 30. So now it'll create a screen pauser that lasts for half a second if I blow up one of these. There it is. So cool. And if I do nothing, it'll be 3. So like I said, you can experiment around with where you want to put screen pause. For instance, we could put one on whenever we fire our bullets. I found that to make the game feel too slow though. So we can try that if we want. So I'm going to copy this, clear my workspace again, and we can go into our player and find where we actually shoot our projectiles. And so my player step event, and we have the shooting over here. So here's where we create the bullets. And we can just put the screen pause at the very bottom of this shooting code right here. And maybe since we shoot bullets a lot, maybe we only want the timer to be like 1 or 2. So let's just see what that looks like. Okay, so it's pretty intense. Makes the game feel super choppy, and I bet especially, oh yeah, that makes the game feel super choppy. So yeah, you maybe wouldn't want to do that for something like this. I figured this probably wouldn't look very good for something as fast as the bullet shooting. So we can get rid of that, but we can add it for when the player gets hit. So we can easily add this to our get damaged script. Remember how we did in our screen pause script up here, we returned a true or a false value? Well, we can do the same thing in our get damaged. So we can go into our get damaged script. I'm going to open it up, and we can return a true or false value. Now we're going to do it slightly differently than we did for our screen pause, because, and I hope you don't mind if I make this text a little bit smaller just so I can get more on screen. Because as I mentioned, return, the keyword, works very similarly to exit, where it stops any code running under this. So if I were to return a value here, that works the same way as exit does. So we could put that here, but another thing we want to do is we want to come down here where we take damage, which is right here. You see, we're already setting hit confirm to be true. We're already using a variable like this where we're looping through. Then we're saying, okay, if we've hit confirmed, we set our iframe timer. We're going to be doing a similar thing, except we basically want to be returning this hit confirm value. And if we were to return it right here, so return hit confirm, that would exit out our code right here. So we don't want to do that. So since we already have this, we only want to return it at the very, very end. So return hit confirm variable value. So all the way down here, hit confirm will either be a false or it's been set to true over here. So we can return our hit confirm easily enough. So now we'll be getting true or false whether or not we just got hit by something whenever we call our get damaged function. But we also just want to go ahead and say, in this case up here where we're using the iframes, remember we're exiting up here. So we're not running any of the damage code. And so basically we need to replace this exit and just return false. Because if our iframes are running out, then that means we can't get hit at all. So exit by returning the function as false. So return false. That works exactly the same way, except now, even if we're exiting up here, we're still getting a return from get damaged. So the cool thing about slightly editing this function like this is it means that now any object that runs this code knows whether or not it's being hit, and it can run its own special code. So like our player, for instance, we can go back to our player. And so now instead of just calling get damaged by itself, which we could still do if we wanted to, we could say if get damaged, then run this code. And so that means that we're going to be running this code, but also if this code is returning true, then we could do something like screen pause. So create screen pause, and nice. So to test this, and because I think it looks pretty good, we're actually going to put a pretty big pause here. So I put 25 frames, which is slightly under half a second. So let's see if that works out for us. If we did everything right in here, first of all, our iframes should still work. So whenever we get hit, the screen should pause, and we should still be able to use our iframes. Oh, okay, I got an error, and I think I know what went wrong. I just wasn't being very careful, so let's abort and let's go back into our get damage script to check. So what's probably happening here is hit confirm is probably only being set in this circumstance, right? Okay, yeah. So hit confirm is being set inside of our collision check for a damage object. So simple enough, we could just move this outside of that collision check. And as long as we set it outside anywhere, it doesn't matter. So we can set it right above this. We could even set it at the very top here if we wanted. But either way, this should give us what we're looking for. So, okay, the game runs. If I get hit, big screen pause, and my iframes are still working. So everything is working exactly how it was, but now we have an easy way to reference whether or not we've actually gotten damaged by something. So cool. So like I said, this is a pretty big hit pause, and having it as a big number helps to make sure that we see it. But also from a creative standpoint, I actually really like it whenever games have a big hit pause value like that. I don't think it's right for necessarily every game, but for a game like this with a bunch of stuff going on screen, and the player isn't having to do a lot of precise inputs, so a hit pause won't interrupt anything that they're doing. I like the impact that a big hard freeze has, and especially whenever you start coupling it stuff with like a heavy screen shake and maybe like a vignette or something like that, you get something kind of like Hollow Knight where when you get hit, it feels like a big hit. And it's also beneficial to have that kind of like screen pause there, because in a game like this, it can help you see as you get hit. It gives you half a second for your brain to recognize like, oh, okay, I got hit by a bullet from the right. So I know where that just came from and all that stuff. So cool. That's pretty much everything with screen pausing. We made an actual physical like pause menu type thing. We covered how to use screen pausing in our step events, which remember, you're going to have to use this line of code for any object that runs important code in the step event that you want to be paused. And then we actually figured out how to do the individual screen pausing and hit pause stuff. So awesome. Now we can move on to something else. And since we were just talking about it, I kind of want to move on to camera shaking, because we're going to add it on top of this screen pause for whenever the player gets hit, and it's going to have so much more impact. So first, I'm going to exit out of here and clear out my workspace once again. So let's open up our object camera. And actually, we're going to add a create event now, because now we're going to need some variables that help us keep track of the camera shaking. So we're going to do the shaking on both axes, whatever you call it. So we're going to have an X shake and set that equal to 0, and a Y shake and set that equal to 0. And we're going to need multiple different variables for each one of these to kind of calculate the X shaking and stuff like that. And so let's talk about it for a split second before we actually do it. What we're going to do is use the same principle as our hearts and our pickups did. So you remember how we did that, which was we used a 360 degree input, and we're basically returning the Y value of a sine wave. So they go up and down, and it's very similar to using the length direction functions. I'm trying my best to dodge here, but you see, it just goes up and down like that. We're basically going to use the same exact principle for our camera's X and Y shaking, but instead of doing it really slowly like that, we're going to do it like fast. So it goes like this. So it's like a spring. So it'll start really high intensity and it'll keep bouncing back until it like, settles in. So slowly it'll be like a bounce and then like that, but we're just going to do it fast. So we're going to be using the same method that we used for that. And then we're also going to need an input value for how high the shaking should be, the intensity of the curves. So first, let's just do it with the X. So again, we're going to need a direction. So I'm going to call this the X shake direction. And we'll start that off at 0. And we want the X shake direction speed. So the speed at which it goes around 360 degrees. And again, I want that to happen fast, really fast. So if I did 45 degrees, that means we'd go like halfway up and then all the way up, then halfway down, back to 0, halfway -1, -1/2, 1, -1/2, 0, like that. So pretty fast. It does that, every frame it progresses that. So very fast. And then we want the actual intensity of how high and low it goes. So we want the X shake amount, set that equal to 0. And lastly, we want the X shake amount speed. And we just need to think of this as how fast does it take us to decrease our intensity by 1 pixel is how I like to think of it. So I want to say every 4 frames, the intensity goes down to pixel. So I'm going to say 1 pixel divided by 4 frames, 1/4. Because what we're going to want to do is we're going to ultimately want to have a function where we can call the camera shaking function, but we can input the intensity. So the amount of shaking. And so we just want like a flat rate for that shaking to decrease by. This is kind of hard to picture. Don't worry, as always, we're going to go through it. So now before we do any of the Y stuff, let's just move on to the step event and I'll show you how we're doing it with the X. So into our end step event, you need to get the heck out of here. So we're locked into the player, and before we actually set our camera position and clamp it, we now want to calculate our camera shaking. So I'm gonna make that a little bit bigger. So like I said, first we're doing our X shake. So this is our X shake. And so let's start with our last line of code because it's something we've seen already. So ultimately, our X shaking amount is going to be the D sign of our X shake direction. I explained that a little bit ago whenever we talked about the hearts, and I showed you how to do those. So again, this is going to be returning between a 1 and a -1 based on a 360-degree circle, the Y value of that, and then we're going to multiply that times the X shake amount, and that will give us the intensity. So the X shake amount is going to start high, so we'll say it starts at 4 pixels, and as our D sign bounces back and forth between 1 and -1 like this, the X shake amount is going to start at 4, so it's going to start like here, but then it's going to slowly count down so that way it shakes this way until it's nothing left. So that's what our X shake is going to be. Now let's determine these two things. So first things first, we can check our X shake amount because we only really need to add the direction and subtract from the X shake if our X shake is greater than 0, right? Because otherwise there's not going to be a visible difference. No matter what our D sign of our direction is, if shake amount is 0, then our X shake value is always going to be 0. And if it's 0, then we don't need to subtract from it anymore. So first we're checking to make sure it's above 0. And if it is, we can move the direction forwards. So X shake direction plus equals our X shake direction speed. So that way it's going around the 360 degrees. And then obviously we want to get rid of the intensity of the X shake amount. And we want to do that by subtracting our X shake amount speed. So that's pretty much it. Now all we really want is to add in some cleanup. So because we don't know what we're going to be setting our X shake amount to, because we could set it to anything in the function that we're going to make. So, you know, we could set X shake amount to 5.5 or something like that. So 5.5 pixels and bouncing back and forth like that. We just want to make sure that our X shake amount doesn't go below 0, because then our camera would be a little wonky and offset by like a portion of a pixel or something like that. So we just need to do a little cleanup. So we're going to say otherwise, if our X shake amount is not greater than 0, which means if it's less than or equal to 0, we can set both of our X shake amount and our X shake direction back to 0. So this way we avoid any weird offsets that we might get with negative numbers. And we reset our X shake direction because whenever we start shaking, again, if you can sort of imagine that this line right here is neutral position, and this is positive, and this is negative, and this is positive, or whatever. Whenever we start shaking, we want it to go like this. We want it to go like, whoa, shake out, and then bounce back, and then bounce back. And our D sign intensity is only going to return 0 when it's at 0 degrees or when it's at 180 degrees, right? If you think about it like a circle, it says 0, 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 135 degrees, 180, and then so on and so forth. So we don't want to set our shake amount function and then all of a sudden the screen will jump to 5 pixels up. Like it will teleport to 5 pixels up and then it will start shaking because, you know, maybe our shaking direction was left at 90 degrees or something like that. And so that's just to avoid some bad looking screen jumping, which would look really bad and be kind of jarring for the player to see. So we want it to look nice and smooth while also being a chaotic shake. So yeah, so that's how that works. And our X shaking should work totally fine. So we have the value, and now that means before we clamp it, we can just add in the camera shake to the X and Y positions. So for now, we're just doing the X. So X plus equals X shake. It's being set here to the players, but then we're always adding it as like an offset basically. And so our clamping is still going to work, which is cool, which means that the camera will never shake to be outside of the room. So this code actually visually won't do anything if your room is exactly the same size as your camera. You're not going to see any shaking because if you did shake at all, then your camera will go outside of the room and you would have weird visual problems with that. So remember to test this, your room actually needs to be bigger like mine is. But yeah, so we can test it out now. We just need to add in a way where we can test the X shake amount really quick. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to say if global.swap key pressed. So my right mouse button for swapping weapons. I'm just going to say if I press that button, then we can set the X shake amount to be, I don't know, some kind of big. So 5. So now if I right click while the game is running, it'll set my shake amount to 5, which means it'll start running this code in here and this will start working. So let's test that real quick. So right click. Oh, sorry, I'm pressed right up against the thing. Oh yeah, there it is. So there it is. Nice. It looks pretty smooth. I think it looks just chaotic enough to not be something that makes you super sick. But in case it does, I'm going to stop doing it. But I've confirmed that it is in fact working. And now if it does make you sick, you could try playing around with the speed. So you could increase the X shake amount speed. And by increasing it, you know, maybe I say just over the course of 2 frames, the amount goes down faster. So it probably won't shake as much. So yeah, this is a little bit faster, or sometimes that helps with motion sickness, at least in my experience. If something is too slow, it can make me sick, but also you can slow it down again, you know, just again, play around with this however it works for you. But this is kind of the setting that I thought looked really good, especially in tandem with my Y shake variable that I set up, which is just very slightly different. So let's go ahead and set that up. It's the same thing pretty much. So we need a Y shake direction, set that equal to 0. We need a Y shake direction speed. And here is where I have them differ a little bit. I actually set this one to 60 degrees at a time. One thing you'll notice is that these are both very easily divisible by, you know, out of 360. So we got 0, 45, 90, 135, 180, and then, you know, back around. And this will give us 60, 120, 180, and then back around. So this one divides it up in thirds, which means technically it never gets to the full intensity like this one does, because this one hits a 90 and a 270, but this one will actually kind of stay at the same amplitude a little bit. So it'll go up and stay and then come back down. And I kind of liked the way that this ended up looking. So again, remember, you can change anything however you want to. So my Y shake amount is going to be 0 default also, and my Y shake amount speed is also going to be the same thing as up here. So now let's just do the exact same thing right over here for our Y shake variable. So yeah, go ahead and do that. Like I said, it's exactly the same as this. Remember not to go too fast and accidentally type X's here. They all need to be Y's. Okay, so I added in my Y shake stuff. So Y shake amount, Y, all Y's. And then we need to, actually add it back into the camera coordinates. So Y plus equals Y shake. And in our key check, we can also set our Y shake amount. And I'm going to say this is also going to be 5 because I want to just have our screen shape function just take in a single argument that's just the intensity amount. So I kind of tuned these two separate things so that they didn't look too uniform. So really quick, I'll just show you what this looks like. And yeah, look at that. I think that's pretty good. I think that looks pretty chaotic. So nice, very nice. I like it. And you could try out higher intensity. So let's try like 8 and 8. This is gonna be crazy. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh man, I forgot how much I liked the way this looked. Okay, wow. Color me impressed, me. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyways. Yeah, so I mean, this should also work with super low numbers like 2. It'll just be like a little wimpy. Yeah, that still has impact. So yeah, I like the way that I set this up. But if you want to tweak it differently, then absolutely feel free to change these values around however you want to. All is good. And now we can very simply make our function for this. So let's go into our custom functions, and I'm going to go back to the VFX over here where we have our screen pauses and stuff. I'm also going to respace everything to be all separated from each other. Maybe like that. Okay. And this function is going to be screen shake, or you can call it camera shake if you want. So like I said, we're going to have one argument, and that's going to be the amount that we want. We can put a default value, so default 3 or 4 or something like that. It doesn't really matter. I think every time I would call this function, I'll probably specify how much screen shake I want. But anyways, all we're going to do in this is exactly what we did in that step event. So first, since we can call this from any object, we're going to say with object camera, and then we're going to set our X shake amount to be the amount that we're passing in, and our Y shake amount is going to be the amount that we're passing in as well. So if I went back into this camera object and just plugged that in here, so screen shake, where you screen shake at the 4 intensity, I can check that out. Still works just the same. And so now we can add it in other places. So I'm going to get rid of that testing code because we don't need it. And let's go back in the player and add that when we get hit. So here we are, get damaged. We do a screen pause and we shake the screen. So I'm gonna say screen shake, and I want this one to be a big impact, so I'll do like 6. 8 was a little crazy, but I think 6 is pretty good. So if I get hit by someone, it looks like this. Oh yeah, look at that. Look at all that impact. You know what happened when you see all that. You absolutely know what happened. Okay, now I can think of something else that might want to have a screen shake. Maybe those TNTs, right? That could do with like a big screen shake, I think. So let's add one in there. Let's go to the boom crate. I'm gonna go to my boom crate, and in the step event here, which I already had it up, but so step event here, and right under where we make our screen pause, let's do some screen shake. So screen shake. And I'll make this one big, so like I make this one 8. I'm gonna go crazy with it. So let's do that. Someone help me blow this up. Oh yeah, oh yeah! Look at all this. I'm loving it. And now I'll show you a little secret, which I actually had in my game, but I kind of decided was a little too intense for me. But we tried the screen pause for whenever we fired our bullets, and that was, you know, that didn't work out too well. But let's maybe try a little subtle camera shake while we're shooting. So let's do that. Let's go back into the player, and we want to go into the step event where we're shooting our weapon, and it's this whole block here. So we know we're shooting if we're doing this. So again, we could add it down here or we could add it up here. It doesn't really matter. As long as we're running this code, we're definitely shooting a bullet. So let's do a little bit of screen shake. So screen shake. And I think 1 might be too small, so let's set it to 2. But again, this is probably gonna look pretty crazy on its own. So let's see here. Oh yeah, look at that. That's like crazy. That's like a super heavy feeling weapon, especially if I get like the machine gun. That's gonna be like, oh man, look at that. That's bonkers. It's really silly looking. I feel like a comedy game would probably have something like this. But yeah, like that's ridiculous. Whoa. But it does change the feel of the game like crazy, doesn't it? I'm gonna see what Screen Shake 1 looks like, because it will do something, but not much. Oh, it still does something, and that's a lot more subtle. So like maybe, oh yeah, see, that's not so bad. So yeah, I mean, if you like this, you keep this on. In fact, I don't know why I didn't like this at first. I kind of do like this, but just for the sake of, if there's anyone watching who does not like looking at this, I'm gonna turn it off. But you feel free to keep that on, because that feels kind of cool. And on the subject of people who might not like it, let me show you a cool little hack you can do. So let's open up our custom functions again and go to our screen shake. So in a lot of games, you'll have an option that's like turn screen shake on or off, or change the intensity of it, which is a pretty good option to have, because like I said, some people can kind of get sick looking at that. So imagine in our object HUD or something, we have set like a global dot screen shake amount or something like that, right? We obviously don't have one right now, but let's say, you know, we set it based on like a percentage. So we set it from 0 to 1, and we have a menu where we can decrease this value and increase this value. If you have a variable like this, you can just multiply your amount by this screen shake setting. And so if global.screenShake amount is, you know, 0, which would, you know, ultimately be this, and you were to run the game, you see when I get hit, now there is no screen shake anymore, because it's basically just turned the intensity all the way down to 0, which basically just means it's off. So that also means you could turn down the intensity to halfway in a setting, so get hit by it, and yep. So it's not as crazy as it was before. So yeah, you can do that, and that also means that while you're testing, if at any point you want to turn the screen shake off for some reason, you can just go in your function and just do this and set it to 0. And it doesn't matter which objects have input the amount, because you're just altering the amount that they've input. So yeah. Anyways, there's lots of places you can put your screen shake if you want to. So have fun with that. I think hit pause and screen shake are massively important tools to know about. I don't think every game necessarily needs them. Some games maybe have too much of them, and there's some games out there who probably could use a little bit of both of those things. But regardless, I think for most games, especially if you use them smartly and you use them in the right places, as we've demonstrated here that there are sometimes wrong places where you don't want to use them, it can really help the feel of a game. So now, as far as I can tell, the last thing that we really have to think about and look about is kind of all the missing other visual effects we have. Like our enemies just pop out of existence, you know, whenever they die, which is kind of lame. Our bullets just kind of, you know, just sort of fling out of our magical rod here, which is also kind of lame. Our bullets don't make any kind of impact on anything. They just kind of go away when they need to go away, and that's a little lame, not gonna lie. And we also have our crates that don't get cracked, but we have our TNT things that get cracked. And also, trust me, the irony that in the fact that whenever I said the word cracked, my voice cracked is not lost on me. Yeah, anyways, speaking of that TNT boom crate, that thing is awesome because basically what we have, you remember that boom object, we used it to create some damage objects, but before we did that, it was just a cool visual that animates and then gets rid of itself once it's done animating. So why, for instance, could we not do that in other situations? Okay, so one more to go. The next video is what I would say is the last main video of the series, part 13. And then after that, there's a little bonus episode, and then there's a stream that's up that also builds on this game, and there might be a couple more streams at some point, I don't know. But as far as what I consider to be like the main series, the next one is the last one. So yeah, I'll let you scamper on over to part 13. But before we go, let me just thank my star gamers on Patreon: Nixionic, Red Dragon Redemption, Null, Joseph Sandlin, Midnight, Jerica Deloach, AOGO, Homeless Bums Ahoy, Captain Ludwig, Christian Donovan, Nick, Crunch Sting, and Mike Yeager. Thank you guys so much. You are the best, and thank you so much to my other patrons, and thank you for getting this far in the series. And that's really all I gotta say right now, so see you in the next one.